Before the Berlin Conference, before colonizers sliced Africa into pieces like cake at a banquet, before dotted lines carved through kingdoms and kinships, Africa was already a world of empires, of scholars, of kings and queens, of builders and traders, of harmony and conflict. A world without artificial borders, a world forgotten by design. This is the story of Africa, the Africa that came before the borders. Long before the name Nigeria was invented by British lips, the Yoruba had already built cities. Ile-Ife, Oyo, massive city-states governed by divine kings called Obas, their courts full of astrologers, diplomats, and blacksmiths. Their art, cast in bronze, sculpted in terracotta, still stuns the world today. So advanced that early European scholars couldn't believe Africans made them. Before Ghana was reduced to a nation-state on a map, the Ghana Empire, also called Ouagadougou, flourished in West Africa for centuries. It was not a village, not a tribe, but a kingdom of gold, a center of trade where salt and wealth crossed the Sahara on camelback, where kings ruled with armies and merchants debated in the sun-drenched markets. And then came Mali, a name that still echoes, for it gave the world Mansa Musa, the richest man to ever live. His empire stretched across Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Mali, Niger. It was a web of trade and scholarship. Timbuktu, its jewel, had libraries with thousands of books. It welcomed the world and taught it too. You were not poor before colonizers came. You were not waiting to be discovered. You were building civilizations. In the east stood Axum, in present-day Ethiopia. By the 4th century AD, Axum was minting its own currency, building stone obelisks that touched the sky, and embracing Christianity before most of Europe even knew the name of Christ. They traded with Byzantium, Persia, India. They carved churches into rock. They held court in Gez, one of the oldest written languages still studied today. And north of Axum stood Nubia, Kush, land of the Black Pharaohs. Yes, Black Pharaohs. For centuries, Nubian queens and kings ruled parts of Egypt. They built pyramids, more than Egypt ever did. They tamed the Nile. They wrote in Meroitic script. They waged wars and signed peace treaties. And they did it with skin kissed by the sun. In Central Africa, the Kingdom of Congo rose, a centralized state with diplomatic links to Portugal by the 15th century. They had a king called the Manikongo, who ruled over a federation of provinces. They had taxation systems, laws, infrastructure. And far south in what is now Zimbabwe, stone cities rose without mortar. Great Zimbabwe, a feat of architecture. Towering walls, complex corridors, and majestic towers, all built with no European blueprint, no colonial guidance, just African genius. At its height, Great Zimbabwe controlled trade from the interior to the Swahili coast. Gold, ivory, copper flowed from its hands. And what of the Swahili city-states? On the coast of Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique, ancient African ports bustled with life. Kilwa, Mombasa, Lamu. They were cosmopolitan hubs, blending African, Arab, Persian, and Indian cultures. They wrote in Swahili, built in coral stone, and sailed dhows across the Indian Ocean. They were not isolated. They were global. They were not backward. They were advanced. These were civilizations, not tribes. They had laws, trade, military, diplomacy. They rose and fell like every empire in history. But unlike Europe's empires, theirs were buried, intentionally. Why? Because to conquer a people, you must first erase their past. Make them believe they had none. Make them think history began with chains. But it didn't. Your ancestors were kings, queens, scholars, architects, traders, scientists, sailors, builders of cities in stone, and thinkers in verse. Africa before the borders was not chaos. It was complex. It was civilization. And yet, when the Berlin Conference came in 1884, not one African sat at the table. European men drew lines with rulers and pens across lands they had never seen. They split kingdoms. They separated from their cousins. They forced enemies to live as neighbors and called it order. The empires that stood for centuries crumbled, not from within, but under colonial boots and lies. Their stories are rewritten or forgotten, their names changed, their languages were demonized. But the stone remembers, drums remember, dust remembers, and we remember. It is time to reclaim what was stolen. Not just land, but legacy. Not just names, but narratives. Not just artifacts, but identity. Africa before the borders was beautiful, and it still echoes in our languages, our traditions, our songs. So let us speak to them. Let us tell them. Let us remember, before there was Nigeria, there was Ife. Before there was South Africa, there was Mapungubwe. Before Ghana became a flag, it was an empire. Your roots are deeper than borders. Your history is older than maps. You come from kingdoms that ruled without chains, from cities that rose without slavery, from minds that learned without colonizers. Let the world know, Africa was not waiting for the world. The world was late. This is Echoes of Africa, and today the echo has returned.